Welcome to The Blue with Joe Garitano and Steve Taylor, a semi-regular podcast brought to you from Press Express Studio B. Join us in exploring, discussing, and kvetching about all things Wildwood.
Welcome to The Blue. This is Joe Garitano, and along with me, Steve Taylor. And in this episode here, we're going to feature Mr. Joe Mangano. He is an epidemiologist with the Group Radiation and Public Health Project. He is a researcher, author, and also a caretaker of probably thousands of Cold War era baby teeth left over from a Washington University study that helped end open air testing of nuclear weapons. And we have Joe here because he worked with these baby teeth, and many of these teeth came from not too far from Wildwood, Missouri, right here, a couple miles away at Washington University's Tyson Research Center there. And I'm glad to have Joe here joining us, where we can learn more about the role that he and others have played in trying to make our world safer. So welcome, Joe. How are you?
Oh, very well. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, before we dive into things, Joe, I heard something of great interest. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, and I understand that you spent some time in Brooklyn as well. So we have two Joes that have both spent time in Brooklyn here on this episode here. And, that's where my family is. My parents are still there. I got lots of relatives that are still there. And I go back to visit them, but also because of the food there and certainly the culture here of the city, of New York City there. But Joe, having spent some time there, I'm sure you can relate to some of the things that I mentioned there, just the culture, the food, the excitement of a big city there, right?
No question about it.
Well, good. So, Steve, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. It was a great day today. I'm really excited to have Joe with us. He's really part of history, and this region, St. Louis, played a major role with this baby tooth study. I mean, I think we're going to learn a lot about Cold War history, and the role of WashU and the region and these teeth and actually helping to bring an end to open air nuclear testing. So I'm really excited for this show and for this program.
So I think in this episode here, Mr. Mangano, I think you will help educate us and the listeners here into the what went on back during that time, and really what kind of information you were able to gather from the baby teeth that have been collected over the years. And from my understanding, and I'm no expert in this, but obviously the nuclear type of testing that went on in the world, and I guess we're looking back, decades ago, that whenever that something like that happened, there is some kind of contamination that's going on in the environment. Is that so, Joe?
No, absolutely. Certainly with radioactivity, yes.
So with the radioactivity, Joe, I imagine that it's something that just doesn't dissipate so quickly and just kind of go away. Does it stick around?
Well, there are many different radioactive chemicals that come from atomic bombs or nuclear plants. Some disappear and decay very quickly. Others take longer. Some take thousands of years. So overall, yes, it pretty much sticks around forever.
And do they have all similar type of impact on the human body, or I guess it depends on what is it what goes into the nuclear bomb that they put into it? I'm looking to see just to educate myself more.
Yeah, well, it's really a mixture of radioactive chemicals. When an atomic bomb explodes, it starts with a splitting of uranium atoms. Now, that's as chemically deep as I'm going to get. What happens when you split these atoms is two things. Number one, you get very high heat, okay, which cause and used in atomic bombs, kill people and cause great injury. And two, waste products are created when that uranium atom splits. over 100 waste products. These are chemicals that we don't find in nature, but only when either an atomic bomb explodes or when a nuclear power plant operates. And there are many different ones, including iodine 131, strontium 90, cesium 137. Each of them are radioactive, and each of them enters human bodies once it's in the air through rainfall or snowfall, and then the food chain. Once it gets into the body, each type of chemical does something different. Iodine seeks out the thyroid gland around the throat. Strontium goes for the bone and the teeth. Cesium goes through all the soft tissues in the body. However, each one of these does the same thing. Because they're radioactive, they either kill cells or injure them. Okay, and which can lead to diseases like cancer and birth defects and others. That's really and the same thing happens with nuclear power plants when it releases the same toxic mix of chemicals.
It's interesting. I was watching some video clips from an HBO series that came out not too long ago about Chernobyl and the explosion that had occurred there. Was quite a very captivating series. I mean, it really truly made you feel like you were there, and seeing how the thought process and the reaction of the communist government. It was quite interesting to see how they wanted to try to get a handle of the situation before word got out, and there were many, I guess, who were not aware that what was around them and what was the workers that were being put into danger. So kind of interesting. I guess same kind of thought process there with these chemicals that are being released into the air. In that case, it was an explosion, but I do remember, scenes where they were talking about removing the graphite, and
Yes.
I guess that's in the reactor. So this is very interesting. And Joe, I guess before we kind of get into it, how did you get into this kind of work here? I mean, this seems like it does require a lot of study to really understand this.
Well, very simply, as you said, I'm an epidemiologist. I have been working in the health field in hospitals and as a researcher and as a writer and as a regulator. And I've always been interested in public affairs. But one day in 1988, I was reading one of my father's medical journals, and there was this article about these two gentlemen that had started a group and had done some research. And they did a study taking a look at the Chernobyl meltdown's releases of this fallout we were talking about, because it did go around the world, and including the United States. And they took a look at mortality, and they estimated that in the 4 months after Chernobyl, about 15,000 additional deaths occurred. Every one of us in our life has these aha moments. That was one of mine. I said, boy, I had no idea that this kind of fallout, from reactors could go that far, and it could do this. And I just happened to pick up the phone and call up and say, I'd like to know more and to do more. And here I am. That's and what the group is a unique one. Its mandate is to do research and educate the public on the health hazards of nuclear power, mostly from nuclear power plants, many of which are still in operation now, but also with the atomic bomb fallout, both of which are the same toxic mix of chemicals.
And this is the Radiation and Public Health Project?
That's right. We've done 37 medical journal articles. We've written 8 books, been covered by a number of prominent media. It's a topic that government, unfortunately, doesn't really do many studies on, and we're sort of picking up the slack.
Very impressive, Joe. Very impressive. So I guess let's kind of bring it to home here in Wildwood, here in Missouri. how I learned about this is that the Washington University Tyson's research facility, which is just a couple miles here from basically downtown Wildwood, was, I guess, a repository for some of these baby teeth, or perhaps all of them. And I'm looking to see if you could share a little bit more. Then how does that get involved with the work that you do, and what did they reveal?
Well, I'm going to first start by saying that one of the projects we did do was a study of baby teeth. Okay, we collected and tested 5,000 teeth for this one chemical, strontium 90, and both near and far from nuclear plants. We found that the highest levels were close to the plant, 50% higher. We found that as time went on in the 80s and 90s, the levels got higher. And we found that the trends in strontium in the teeth were the same as the local trends in childhood cancer. Now, we've published 5 of our journal articles on them. Now, we can't take credit for inventing this because we have to go all the way back to 1958, which was before nuclear power reactors operated, but it was a time when the United States and the Soviet Union and several other countries were testing atomic bombs above the ground. A lot of people have seen photos and film of these mushroom clouds after the atomic bomb exploded over the Nevada desert or out in the South Pacific. It caused a massive cloud that went up into the stratosphere. And the key here is you have to understand that even though the shots were in the South Pacific and Nevada, because it got so high, it was all these 100 plus toxic chemicals were taken by the prevailing winds, which blow west to east, and moved across the entire United States. And when rainfall or snowfall occurred, these chemicals, which are both metal particles and gases, return to Earth and got into the food chain and thus got into human bodies. So here we are in 1958. This arms race was going on. There were thousands of atomic bombs being built and tested, and people were quite worried of a nuclear war between the two major powers, the U.S. and the Soviet Union. In fact, it was more than a worry. It was a great fear. The military leaders in both countries were absolutely convinced that this was a war that should be fought and that could be won, and a number of political leaders were as well. Luckily, we never had that nuclear war, although we came very, very close in 1962 in the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Khrushchev and President John F. Kennedy finally, at the last minute, it was a matter of a day or so before the war was, they came up with a diplomatic solution. Anyway, 1958, a number of scientists and citizens in St. Louis got together. The scientists were from Washington University, and the citizens were from a group called the Committee for Nuclear Information. They got together and said, you know what? We don't really know. We know these bomb tests are occurring, and we know that this dangerous stuff is getting into the air. We don't know quite how much was getting in the body. The government did a few small studies and really weren't making them public. So they said they read it. There was an article by a scientist who worked for the federal government, said, let's do a baby tooth census. And sure enough, the baby tooth study was born in December 58. And for the next 12 years, these citizens and scientists collected, and you are hearing me correctly, 320,000 baby teeth. It was a phenomenal grassroots effort done by volunteers to encourage baby tooth donations. They went to schools, they went to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, they went to dentists, they got politicians to give talks about it, encouraging the donation of teeth. It was quite an impressive feat. And the university tested the teeth, came up with the results, and they published some studies, one of which got to the desk of President Kennedy's science advisor, who went to the president and said, this stuff, as we're doing more tests, there's greater and greater levels of this stuff that are collecting in our children's bone, in all human bones and teeth. And it was actually used in Senate testimony by one of the physicians from Washington U, Eric Reese, on behalf of the Test Ban Treaty, which was enacted in 1963, banning all above-ground tests by the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain. And a few years later, China and Russia stopped, and that was the end of above-ground testing. So that was the end of the St. Louis baby tooth study, or so we thought. They had done what they wanted to do. And we're going to fast forward here from 1970, when the study ended, to June 2001, when I was in my home in Brooklyn and got a phone call from one of the professors in the biology department that had worked on the study. I got to know these people when we did our study because they were sort of the prototype. And he said, "Hi, Joe. I was out at Tyson Valley today." And I thought, Tyson Valley? I said, didn't mean a thing to me. Obviously, it's that World War II gunnery in Wildwood, Missouri. And he said, we were looking for storage space. He went to this space. It's kind of like a cinder block space. And we found some teeth. And I said, oh, that's interesting. You mean the old teeth from the original? He says, yes. And he said, well, I'll tomorrow we're going back again and spend more time. But if you're interested, I'll let you know. I said, sure. Well, the next day the phone rang again, and this time his tone was a lot more dramatic. He said, Joe, you better sit down. I said, why? Not only are there teeth there are thousands and thousands of these teeth that were collected for the study but never used. To test a tooth, you have to destroy it. You have to grind it up as a powder and put it in solution. He said, we have contacted Dr. Barry Commoner, who was very prominent in doing the original study. We asked him if he has any use for them. He said no. Now we're asking you because you guys are the only other ones in the U.S. that have ever done a tooth study. And I said, well, by all means, please. And the biology department donated them to us. And we have kept the teeth in storage ever since. I should add that when the teeth were sent to us, we gave the story to the media, and it got on the Associated Press and many papers, not just the Post-Dispatch, but many papers, and put this story in there. And I had I guess I didn't quite see it coming, but I had them put my email address in there, And sure enough, when people read the Post-Dispatch and other papers, a lot of them remembered the study. And you should have seen my email. Just they were flying in by the dozens and the hundreds. Do you have my tooth? I remember the study, and so on. Well, we can kind of fast forward to now, because we have wanted to do studies on what that Washington U never did, and that was to look at the health effects of the bomb fall. They just looked at the amount of this radioactive chemical, strontium-90. As the test went on, it went up, and after the treaty, the test ban was signed, it dropped rapidly, dropped by half in 4 years. It's probably saved many, many lives. Because this is not just St. Louis, we're talking about the entire country. We did one study in 2010, and we found that a sample of tooth donors who had died of cancer by age 50 had over twice the amount, over double the amount of strontium than tooth donors who were 50 years old and were still alive and were healthy. Okay, where we want to build on that. Okay, there are, again, about 85,000 teeth in there. There's a lot we can do. I'll add the last chapter, then I'll turn it back to you. I know I'm going on here. About 3 years ago, I was introduced to a public health professor at Harvard University, whose grandfather just happened to be a physicist who had worked on the original atomic bomb project and later became a strong opponent of the nuclear arms buildup. And he was very mesmerized by this thing. He couldn't believe that many teeth had been collected and were still around. So what Harvard has done is they have gotten a grant from the National Institutes of Health. It's a 5-year grant. The first year is being devoted to entering data on the teeth and the teeth donors. I neglected to say that each tooth is in a small manila envelope with a number on it, and it's paper clipped to a 3x5 card with information on the tooth and the donor. You know, John Jones, son of Joe and Mary Jones, born November 1, and incisor tooth, and so on, with the address where they lived when they gave the tooth. So they're being entered. We're about half done now. And the following 4 years, Harvard is going to be doing a series of studies, not on radioactivity, but on heavy metals, toxic metals, which can be detected in teeth. There's a lot of toxins that can be detected in teeth. Certainly, our focus is going to be radioactivity, but we want this really unique treasure chest of teeth to be available to all the scientific community, and to see how early life exposures to toxic chemicals play out in people's health later on in their lives. So that brings us up to date. And I know it went on a while, but we covered about 62 years in 7 minutes here. So
Yeah, well, Joe, I really appreciate you walking us through this. I'm just listening to this and going, wow. I mean, I don't even know where to begin because this is a lot of good information. I mean, questions are just going through my mind now. Like, do we, are we, these people that donated those teeth, they donated it back then, and there's still so much that I guess we can get out of these teeth. Like you said, those that have not been destroyed as part of that testing or evaluation. But there's probably people living that, who donated teeth that I guess that probably could see how they are doing so many years later after they donated those baby teeth to see, what the effects have been. And obviously, what kind of, contamination has occurred that could affect their health. Kind of makes me think of like how people are doing these DNA type tests today, and then they give you back your results, right? And they tell you like, here's your probability or your chance of,
right.
If you have a certain type of, characteristic in there. But Steve, right? What do you think? I mean, this is really impressive to learn how this area right here close to Wildwood could impact so much in the science field.
Well, it's fascinating. You have Washington University. You have Barry Commoner. Now, Joe, was Barry a faculty? Was Mr. Commoner faculty at WashU at that time?
Yeah, he was a biology professor.
Well, yeah, and did you have the opportunity to meet Mr. Commoner?
I met him once, and I did speak to him several times. He was a very prominent guy. He not only from a technical biology standpoint, but he even did things like he got 2 5-year large grants from the federal government, the National Institute of Dental Health, to support this study. It's really one of the great, I would say, hidden or secret efforts in health research in the 20th century. He worked with a number of other professors at Washington U, but it was really his study primarily.
Well, it's a famous study, and he was a famous proponent of health research, and that WashU was so central to that is very interesting. And I don't know if you know this or not, Joe, but um, uh, St. Louis has a lot of Cold War and defense connections. I believe that the fuel for the first atomic bombs were actually a lot of the processing was done in St. Louis, and we actually have some leftovers from that at a landfill which has a subterranean fire, and we also had Agent Orange. I guess that was more in the 70s. That was produced in certain areas here. There's a huge defense contractor presence in St. Louis. So I'm sure you were surprised to get that call. But the fact that those teeth are here, I mean, it almost, there's so much that's happened in St. Louis when it comes to defense. It's striking to me. So you said it's one of the hidden secrets or one of the hidden gems. So it's not just history. You think there's going to be able to be more research done with these teeth with this Harvard grant? What do you think there can be more radiation studies? Harvard is going to be concentrating on metals, but do you think there's more to be done with radiation?
Oh, no question about it. As I said before, some of these chemicals stay in the body, in the teeth, for a long time. Like strontium 90 will be there 300 years. All right. Some of it is decayed already, but certainly it's there. And there are other chemicals, plutonium, which has a half-life of thousands of years. Okay, it's there forever, and it's really hasn't, not much of it is decayed in just the 50 or 60 years since then. So there's certainly the ability for us to not just see. I mean, one thing is to see what happened to the baby boomer generation, the ones who were children during this time they were doing the study back in the 1960s. But we can also use it as a kind of a prediction model for future generations, the boomers' children and grandchildren, who many of whom live close to nuclear power plants and are exposed to the same mix of 100 plus radioactive chemicals, not for military purposes, but to generate electricity. We are planning to. No, I don't think we're going to collect thousands of more teeth, but we're going to collect more teeth from younger people and compare what's the amount of strontium 90 or plutonium or whatever in the teeth for baby boomers and those who are are the younger generation now, and we can sort of predict the cancer future as well, or the cancer risk as well. Based on what's happened to the baby boomers who are now in their 50s and 60s and are starting to.
So, Mr. Mangano, the study started in 58 and went till 70, and I think it was in 63 that the seminal report, that landed on President Kennedy's desk was produced, the one that led to the nuclear test ban treaty. So there were more reports written by WashU or researchers after that. I was reading, or I've heard that basically, what did the strontium 90 look like after the test ban treaty went in? Was that part of the study?
Oh yes. They actually also, in addition to baby teeth, also tested human bones. All right, that was a much smaller part of the study, but it was bones from stillborn children. All right, the jaw bones. They wanted to, because they could tell, how much radiation had been taken in. Strontium 90, by the way, only even if you're 8 years old and you've lost a baby tooth, almost all of the strontium-90 was taken up late in pregnancy and very early in infancy. So really at the time of birth. So so they also, when the test ban treaty went into effect, they also collected some of these bone samples from children, and they found a rapid turnaround from 1950 to 1963. The amount of strontium went up 50 times, not 50%, 50 times, which is like, 5,000%. And immediately in 1963, it turned around, and 4 years later, it had been chopped in half. Okay, that treaty took a lot of the radiation out of the environment, and obviously, made things much safer. No one really knows how helpful the treaty was. There was one study done a year or so ago by a gentleman from the University of Arizona. He made an estimate. I don't know how he did it. It's very complicated, but he estimated that stopping the above ground tests, the U.S., the Soviets, and the British, saved somewhere between 16 and 24 million lives in the United States alone, okay, as opposed to if the test had continued. All right, this is preventive health at its finest. All right, you remove a poison and you get healthier people. We know the infant death rates didn't change at all as the bomb tests went on nationwide, and as soon as 63 came around, boom, down it went, rapidly. Same with babies born underweight. Didn't change at all. And then after 63, straight down. We've documented this in our books and our articles. Again, this was a tremendous boost for the health of Americans, taking this out of the environment. But then we got the nuclear power plants.
So yeah, about the nuclear power plants. So I remember Fukushima obviously was the most recent tragedy, and prior to that was Chernobyl. There's a lot of debate back and forth. It seems like everything's political. Any scientific issue becomes ultimately political, be it global warming, nuclear power, whatever. But what I find very interesting is your study that shows higher presence of radioactive material in people who died by 50 of cancer. That was a very interesting study. Wasn't there also another study that your organization that you're affiliated with, did you do a study around nuclear power plants using teeth? Am I remembering correctly about that?
Yeah, I mentioned we collected 5,000 teeth and tested them in a lab for strontium-90. Some were very near nuclear plants and others were further from it. And again, we found that, this had never been done before, by the way. People don't realize that nuclear power plants, they're not quite as disturbing as atomic bombs. When an atomic bomb exploded, you knew it. It was that big mushroom cloud.
Right.
Aside from the meltdowns we've had, there's really nothing to see with a nuclear reactor. You don't see anything or smell anything or hear anything, but every day, a portion of these waste products, these 100 plus chemicals, are released into the environment, into the atmosphere, and again through rainfall, it gets into the food chain. So we did this study, and again, there were three things we found. One was that near the plant, near 6 different plants in the U.S., the average concentration of the strontium-90 was about 50% higher and far from plant. Number two, as time went on through the 80s and kids born in the 80s and the 90s, the levels went up about 40%. And finally, near these plants, we found that the trends in strontium-90 in teeth were the same as the trends in local childhood cancer. When one went up, the other went up. When one went down, the other went down. And we published these in 5 medical journal articles. And to this day, it is the only study done of in-body radiation of people living near American nuclear plants. There was one in Britain as well. But
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Mangano. Yes, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist. I have a undergraduate degree in physics, so I'm very interested in radiation and nuclear material. What's really scary to me, these chemicals that persist and mimic carbon. I believe the strontium 90 mimics carbon and is taken up, and these are like they continue to emit radiation. I mean, you have a half-life of about 29, 30 years. So every once in a while, you got these this radiation coming. The chemical is breaking down and emitting radiation within the body. That's like a little miniature reactor inside of your bone. So I remember when Fukushima went off, everyone was very focused on what's called gamma radiation. The electromagnetic, the light, like the microwave or the light. But it's a very high frequency, high energy radiation that comes from without you. You cannot eat gamma radiation. So it seems like most of the reports on the news with Fukushima was all about the gamma radiation, that outside the body radiation. What's really scary to me, and what this baby tooth study did, and it will continue to do, is to show us how much, we were taking up into our bodies, and it sits there, right? It sits inside of your body. And like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist like you. But I just have to think that the less of that you have in your bone, the better.
Well, that's you said it pretty simply. Just think, how does it get in your body? Just think of, a glass of milk with strontium 90 in it. Okay, you drink it down, it goes into the stomach, and very quickly it goes into the bloodstream, and just as quickly it goes right for the bone and the teeth. The body thinks it is calcium. All right. I mean, this is the same process of calcium, which obviously is good for health. Strontium 90 is not good for health. It latches onto the bone and teeth and begins, firing these electrons out to break up cells, to break up healthy cells. Ironically, some of these radioactive chemicals are actually used in medicine. For medical treatments. I mean, strontium 90 is used for bone cancer. Why is that? Well, it kills cells, in this case, cancer cells. The idea is to kill cancer cells, but not healthy cells. Okay, it's got a specific purpose. There's really not a part of the body that's not affected. Iodine. Same thing. You drink water with iodine 131 into the stomach, into the bloodstream, and then into the thyroid gland, where it attacks cells, the healthy cells, and leads to thyroid cancer. Strontium 90 leads to not just bone cancer, but it also leads to leukemia, which is cancer of the blood, and also in the strontium 90 also is of all these dangerous chemicals. It might be one of the more harmful ones because it of course attaches to the bone and gets into the bone marrow, which is in the inside of the bone. And in the bone marrow is where the white blood cells and red blood cells are produced. And the white and red cells really are our immune army. All right. Anytime there's something that might present a disease, up and at them come the white and red cells to counter them. Strontium 90 again either destroys them or impairs them. Okay, and this was known very long time ago. Again during the bomb test debate. They had protests. Many of them were young mothers who would go out in their pillbox hats and high heels, and their strollers with a baby in them with signs, "Get the strontium 90 out of my child's milk." Okay, my baby's milk. It's been known for a while. It's not something that's just my opinion, but that I'm making up. It is a great concern. And again, we still have 94 nuclear power reactors in this country. They're starting to close now. They're getting quite old, and they're not building any new ones. They make the same mix of toxic chemicals. They retain a lot of it as waste, which we still don't know what to do with. There's no permanent waste repository. So they're all in these plants all over the country, but they also, as a routine, have to emit some of them, and it gets into human bodies. So that's
right around Callaway, I think, and other nuclear power plants. So if there's an accident where there's a major, well, not even a major release, but if they release off some steam, I think you're supposed to take non-radioactive iodine tablets, right?
That's correct.
That floods your thyroid with iodine, so the radioactive iodine doesn't get to the thyroid.
That's right.
So,
but only the thyroid.
Right. You have other issues, but the thyroid is there's one thing you can do is you have your iodine tablets, and that's supposed to help. And I don't think a lot of people driving past Callaway probably even know that there's all these protocols in place. And it's very interesting if you FOIA incidents around nuclear power plants. There's a little bit more than you would realize. I mean, because not everything's a meltdown, not everything you see on the news, but there's just these little releases now and then. Now, of course, everything's political. There are people who support nuclear power, and we really didn't want to do a show, nuclear power, yes or no. But what I think is really great is that to debate this, people need information. And so this baby tooth study has given a lot of information. I personally think it's information that makes me not want to live by a nuclear power plant. But that's my own personal opinion. But I think it cannot be argued that this baby teeth study historically with the nuclear test ban treaty saved thousands or millions of lives. And then what your organization has done and what Harvard is doing is going to help inform the public when we get involved in these very important debates about nuclear power.
Yeah, I think another key thing too here is again something that's not just my opinion, but it's well known. A dose of radiation is going to affect a child or an infant or a fetus far more than the same dose that's absorbed by an adult. Okay, that's another reason for doing baby. It's easy to collect baby teeth, first of all, but the other thing is that if you're exposed at an early age, there have been estimates of how many times more chances you're going to have to get later develop cancer or other diseases. It's many. So, and the other thing is one thing is the child, and the other thing is the dose. Now, radioactive releases from nuclear plants are small when you can compare it to a big atomic bomb blast or a Chernobyl or Fukushima meltdown. And the debate becomes, are relatively low doses harmful? The nuclear industry and the pro-nuclear people just say yes, they are. They're we have and written into the federal laws are permissible limits, what they call permissible limits. A reactor can release this much in a year, and there can be this much in the water, and so on. Anything below that, the reactor can continue to operate. They take permissible to mean harmless. That's really why our group began. We don't believe in making such a bold assumption like that. You have to do the studies. You have to come up with a proof that it does or doesn't harm people. And that's what we essentially have been doing since the late 1980s with our 37 journal articles and 8 books and so on, is building a case. And in many cases, not every single one, but in many cases, when radiation increases, even at low doses, there is a subsequent increase in disease and deaths.
So,
Well, yeah, I'll let you go, Joe. But I would like to say, the whole idea of it harming younger people disproportionately is clearly seen. When I think one of the bravest things I ever saw with nuclear power was in Fukushima, that older, I think over 50 years old. I mean, there were engineers who said, we'll go in and try to help shut down this plant and to not expose the younger engineers, because it is a statistical game. The longer you have to live with these radiation exposures, the more likely you are to have cancer. So they said, we're not going to live as long, so we'll go in and deal with it. So I think obviously you're right. When it comes to children, we really do have to be careful with nuclear.
Look at CAT scans. I mean, for quite a while now, there's been a lot of concern about giving CAT scans to children. I mean, when they absolutely need it, fine. But there are a lot of CAT scans given in this country every year, including to children, and there is a lot of concern about it, causing harm later on in life. So, no, these are very basic principles. It's a matter of, are we going to discuss this based on research or just based on opinion? We opt for research.
Thank you.
And Joe, it sounds like, groups like the one you're part of and others, that we are probably really grateful for the work that they do, because they kind of act as kind of like an extra set of eyes in making sure that the public and the scientific community knows what's going on. I mean, it sounds like when the initial baby tooth study came out, what they knew back then until that study was completed was not enough to stop open air testing. And then once the study came along, it was kind of that scientific community, the public health side of it, that really helped to expose what was coming about with these, releases of these types of elements into the environment. So I was very curious, because you were talking about, nuclear and also the testing, but nuclear power. So like in Fukushima, I can only imagine probably what you were thinking when you saw this on the news about, this plant releasing, from what I can recall, I guess they were releasing some stuff into the ocean. And I know that there was concern that this was going to eventually make its way across the Pacific and land on the shores of the west coast. So I'm curious to hear what you were thinking back then. And people who rely on seafood, things like that, do they need to really think twice when things like this are happening?
Joe, I'm going to have to correct you first, and that is it is still leaking. Fukushima. They have not contained, even though it's almost 10 years since the meltdown, they have not come close to containing the damage and thus the release of this enormous amount of radioactivity. And yes, a lot of it's going into the Pacific Ocean, which is quite big, of course, but guess what? Just like in the atmosphere after the bomb tests, some of it disappears, some of it's going to stick around a long time. We actually did studies. We had a very hard time getting any data from Japan. So we looked at the West Coast because our EPA collects information on radioactive levels in the air and the water in various cities. And it was very clear that the West Coast got the highest amounts. And we found that in the year after Fukushima, there was a jump in babies, the percent of babies who are born at low weight and born prematurely, along with the percent of babies who are born with underactive thyroid gland. You remember I was talking about iodine attacking the thyroid, and we published those. They got lots of interest on both sides. Some thought it was a well-done study. Some thought were horrified by it, but the fact is we haven't gotten any of these from Japan yet. They're doing one study of childhood thyroid cancer. And they've, I don't know, detected like it's a very rare thing to have thyroid cancer as a child. They've collected, documented 200 cases or so near Fukushima, whereas within 8 years, the expected number in a normal group of children that size would be about 10, and they've had 200. Their government claims it's due to over testing. They're doing an excessively good job of testing, but I think that's more work needs to be done. All right, rather than just ignoring it. So,
Well, maybe one last question before I let you go, Joe. But do you think there's enough testing going on, that for people to know if, like, for example, with Fukushima, is the water, whatever is in the water, such as the food that we eat, the seafood, certainly the birds that carry, that can eat the seafood, and there's quite a food chain. Do you think there's enough testing for us to know really what's out there? Or, are we lucky that there are groups just like the one you're involved in that at least help us to know?
No, there's not nearly enough testing. We do have some, that the government, that our EPA does periodically, but certainly it's just a matter of measuring the amount of radioactivity in the environment. When it comes to taking that step and linking it with health, we're pretty much we pretty much have a monopoly on that in this country. We're the only ones that try to examine the link between radioactive exposures and health.
Wow. Well, this is very eye-opening. It makes you want to think twice about, like, what the environment is around you, what you eat. It certainly affects everything, from even what we breathe in.
Yeah.
What do you think, right, Steve? Yeah.
Oh, I think so. Hey, Joe, do you have any sample teeth with you?
Glad you brought that up, because I just so happen to have how well this is going to show up. This is a 3x5 card.
You need to hold it a little higher. Yeah.
Okay, if you can see this is a manila folder here.
Yep.
With a little number on it. Inside the manila folder is a bulge, and that bulge is a baby tooth. And this rusty paper clip, because this is, almost 60 years old, is to a 3x5 card with the donor's name and the donor's parents and date of birth, the date it was donated, the type of tooth, incisor or molar, whether it was there's decay or fillings in it. And also they looked at whether the baby was breastfed or bottle fed, because you get more strontium-90 from bottle feeding, and so on. Just picture this multiplied times about 85,000, and that's what slumbered in the Tyson Valley facility in Wildwood for over 30 years, and nobody knew about it. Nobody, no one ever told me. And the biology professors we were all shocked. Everyone looked. Did you know this? No. Did you know about this? No. And there it was. So it's a study that is going to continue to go on and continue to do some good for humanity, as it has already.
Excellent, Steve. Right? Who knew that Wildwood could play a role like this?
Well, some people think that. Wildwood just seems to be the center of the universe, doesn't it?
In this case, it is.
The center of the baby tooth universe.
Yes, that's it.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Joe. Really enjoyed this conversation. I never knew much about all of this here, but it is certainly really something. This is heavy stuff here. I mean, just really thinking about, how something could occur, even if it's like a nuclear plant, or the nuclear testing that went on could impact everyone on this planet in some way. And certainly it will make me think twice if I see something on the news about some kind of, whether it's a meltdown or something like that, because, it could come in our direction.
Yeah, I think it's important at any time, but especially now because we have this pandemic going on, and people see it as like the worst thing that's ever happened. Yeah, COVID-19 is a terrible thing, but by no means is it the worst or the again, if things had gone differently in Cuba in 1962, we wouldn't have been around for COVID-19. All right, that was going to end life as on this planet as we know it. So yes, we need to take things like radiation very 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 seriously as well.
Well, thanks again for joining us here, Steve. We'll kick it to you if you've got.
Joe, I just, both of you Joes, you've been great. I mean, I'll tell you what, it's a fascinating story. Maybe we can fit in some video of some nuclear tests from the National Archives or something for those interested. But thanks to both of you, and it's been very enjoyable. And by the way, we do have that nuclear fire at the landfill very close to us, Joe. So we need to I don't know. It'd be nice if they could get that under control too, because the consequences could be severe if that thermal event and the underground waste do meet. Right now, the only plan is a shelter-in-place plan. So hopefully we can get out from under that little part of our nuclear history here in the Wildwood region.
We hope the learning process will make for a healthier future. That's how it works. Thank you again for having me, folks.
Aphrodite, Bendisca, Census, Hera, Hermes, Icarus, Narcissus, Medusa, Ephesus, Ashala, Census, Minerva, Ecopus, I love it when you couscous.